She smiled as she handed me the plate and said, "Let me make it up to you." There were people everywhere, laughter in the background, and the smell of grilled meat floating through the air. But in that moment, all I could focus on was the pale pink shrimp sitting on the edge of the dish. I froze. I'm dangerously allergic to shellfish. One bite would have sent me to the ER. And I was pregnant. No one else knew yet, not even Daniel. But something about her smile made the back of my neck prickle. I looked down at the plate again, then back up at my sister-in-law, Brielle. She was still smiling, too brightly. I didn't eat the shrimp. Colton did. That moment, that plate, that smile, everything spiraled from there. But to understand what happened, I need to take you back. Back to when I first met her. I married Daniel 7 years ago. He was steady, soft-spoken, and the kind of man who didn't just listen, he heard. I loved everything about our marriage, except for one thing. His sister, Brielle. At first, I tried to see the best in her. She was charismatic, always the loudest in the room, and people naturally gravitated toward her. But it didn't take long before the mask slipped. Beneath the charm was someone territorial, manipulative, and deeply jealous of anyone who took her brother's attention. From the beginning, she made it her mission to remind me of every woman Daniel had ever dated. She'd casually drop their names into conversations when I was around, talking about how well they were doing, how she had coffee with one last week, how Daniel could have done so well with her if he hadn't rushed into things. She even once joked in front of his parents that she still thought he should have married her best friend instead of me. I laughed it off at the time. Daniel told her to stop. She didn't. Then came the Instagram obsession. She didn't follow me, but she was always the first to watch my stories. If a male friend from college left a comment, she'd send screenshots to Daniel with notes like, "You okay with this?" Or, "She's putting herself out there a little too much." We laughed about it, but it stung knowing she was always looking for cracks to wedge herself between us. The moment Daniel proposed, everything changed. His parents were thrilled. My family cried. Friends cheered. But Brielle sat still, arms crossed, lips tight. Then, without a word, she stood up and walked out of the party. Daniel followed her outside, only to come back later looking worn down. "She says she's hurt," he told me. She thought she deserved to know before everyone else. Later that night, I received a message from her. It wasn't congratulatory. It was laced with passive-aggressive advice, how I should treat her brother, how I needed to remember. She'd always be the woman in his life first. It unsettled me. I didn't reply, and I knew that silence would offend her more than anything else. After that, she became colder, more calculated. She still involved herself in our wedding preparations, hovering at bridal showers and dress fittings. She criticized everything, from the floral colors to the centerpieces, under the guise of just being honest. She mocked my choices openly, once calling my table decor cheap in front of my future mother-in-law. That was the last straw. One afternoon, while standing in the reception hall with my dress clutched in one hand, I turned to her and said the words I had held back for too long. "You're not invited anymore. I can't take your constant cruelty." She gasped like I had slapped her, then stormed out. Daniel backed me up. So did his mother. Still, I felt shaken. Because I knew. Someone like Brielle doesn't just walk away. She waits. She plans. And I was right. She showed up to our wedding anyway in black. I had chosen soft pinks and ivory for the wedding, a garden celebration in late spring, delicate and light, everything I had dreamed of. But when Brielle walked in, it felt like a storm cloud had entered the room. She was dressed in a floor-length black gown, complete with a veil. A veil. She looked like she was mourning a death, not attending a wedding. And in her mind, maybe she was. Guests turned and stared. Some whispered. A few chuckled, thinking it was a misguided attempt at drama. But I saw the glint in her eyes. She was daring me to react, to ruin my own wedding by losing control. I didn't. I smiled. I let her linger like a shadow in the corner. Daniel's mother, Martha, tried to keep her distance, but I saw her jaw clench every time Brielle opened her mouth. She didn't stop at the dress. She floated around the reception like a ghost from some forgotten tragedy, telling people how sad she was to lose her brother, how hard it was to watch him replace her with someone else. She laughed bitterly during our first dance and made snide comments when I cut the cake. Daniel finally walked over to her table and said, loud enough for those nearby to hear, "This ends now, Brielle. If you can't be here with joy, then leave." Still, she didn't. She just smiled and said, "I have every right to celebrate or grieve how I want." It was Daniel's father, Howard, who eventually stepped in. Calm but firm, he walked her to the edge of the garden and said something low in her ear. She didn't argue. She just turned, veil swaying behind her, and left. I thought that was the end. I really did. After the wedding, I gave birth to our son Lucas. He had Daniel's eyes and my mother's dimpled chin. Holding him felt like holding the future, something clean and untouchable. I didn't want Brielle anywhere near him. I told Daniel that clearly. At first, he resisted. "She's still family," he said. But after everything, he understood. He saw what I saw. Brielle wasn't just toxic. She was dangerous in ways we hadn't fully grasped yet. But then things changed, or so I thought. 2 years after our wedding, Brielle had a miscarriage. She had been dating a man named Colton, a kind man, quieter than she was, always looking at her like she was fire and he was just trying not to get burned. The miscarriage devastated her. She vanished from social media, stopped coming to family dinners, and when she did show up months later, she looked hollow. That's the only word I have for it. Hollow. Out of pity, I softened. I allowed her to visit Lucas. She'd sit with him in the living room, reading to him or building puzzles, and for a while, it seemed like the woman I'd feared had vanished. Even Daniel said so. "Maybe this humbled her," he whispered one night. I wanted to believe it, but it didn't take long before the old Brielle began to resurface. Subtle at first, offhand comments about how tired I looked, how messy the house was, how lucky I was that Daniel still found me attractive post-baby. Then more direct. She started bringing up her own struggles at every opportunity. Every visit became a monologue about her pain, her disappointments, her ex-friends, her unfair bosses. Everyone had wronged her. She was always the victim. Colton eventually proposed. I was surprised. We all were. And even more surprising, we weren't invited to the wedding. Daniel confronted her. "Why are we not invited?" Her answer stunned me. "Because I don't want her ruining my day like I ruined hers," she said, looking me dead in the eye. "I wore black, remember? I know how petty women can be. You might do the same." It was absurd. I had done nothing to her. Nothing. And yet somehow I had become the villain in her script. That night, Daniel sat me down and said, "This has gone too far." He was right. But we had no idea how much further she was willing to go. After that conversation, Daniel spoke with his parents. They were just as stunned, especially since they had been planning to pay for part of Brielle's wedding. But when they heard what she had said to us, accusing me of plotting revenge, of being some jealous monster, they were done. Martha said it flat out. If she wants to exclude her own brother over paranoia, she can pay for her wedding herself. And they meant it. No financial support, no attendance, nothing. That pushed Brielle into full meltdown. She called Daniel sobbing, saying I had turned the whole family against her. She accused me of manipulating everyone, of being so polished it's scary, like I was some kind of evil genius hiding behind soft smiles. Daniel didn't even try to reason with her. He just told her, "You've made your choices. Live with them." But in true Brielle fashion, she didn't stay angry for long. When she needed something, she knew how to play sweet. A week later, she called me directly. Her tone was softer, apologetic. She said she had been under stress, that planning a wedding was harder than she thought, that she just wanted peace. "I want my brother at my side," she said. "And you too. Your family." It sounded rehearsed, but I could hear the tremble behind it. And maybe, foolishly, I believed she meant it. I convinced Daniel to attend the wedding. "Let's just be done with the drama," I said. "Go. Be polite. Then leave." We went. It was fine. Normal. Maybe too normal. Brielle smiled too much. Colton looked strained. But there was no scene, no sabotage. I started to think maybe, just maybe, she was trying to change. 6 months later, she showed up at our doorstep with 2 suitcases and red-rimmed eyes. Colton had left her. She didn't give details, just that they'd been fighting, trying to have a baby, and it had all fallen apart. I didn't ask questions. I just told her she could stay a few nights upstairs. She moved in like she owned the space. And suddenly, every day was about her sadness, her resentment, her bad luck. She spoke like a woman the world had targeted. But beneath it, I sensed something sharper, something calculating. She began to observe me, not just casually, closely, asking where I was going, what I was doing, why I always left for the gym so early. I told her I liked to work out before the office. Sometimes I'd bring my work clothes with me to change after. No big deal. But she looked at me with this tight little smile, like she didn't believe a word of it. One night at dinner, my mother-in-law was telling a story about a friend who had divorced her husband after catching him cheating and walked away with half his assets. Brielle cut in. "Wait, Daniel. Did you and Lauren ever sign a prenup?" The table fell silent. I stared at her. Daniel just blinked. "No," he said. "We didn't. We both do well. We trust each other." Brielle laughed under her breath. "Brave," she muttered. "A lot of people get blindsided." I tried to ignore it, but then she looked right at me and said, "You do carry a lot of outfit changes, Lauren. Are you sure that gym of yours isn't just a cover?" Daniel's fork clattered onto his plate. I stood up. "Excuse me." She raised her eyebrows. "I'm just saying, as his sister, it's my job to protect him." Daniel slammed his napkin down. "Brielle, enough. You don't get to accuse my wife of cheating because you're unhappy in your own life." She flinched. "And don't you ever question whether Lucas is my son again," he added, voice trembling. "You're not a mother. And honestly, after today, I hope you never become one." Her mouth fell open. Everyone sat frozen. Then, without a word, Brielle stood up and stormed off down the hallway. That was the last time we spoke to her for over a year. Until Daniel's birthday. Until the plate. After that dinner, we cut her off completely. No calls. No visits. No updates. Martha and Howard understood. They had seen the shift in Daniel, usually calm and composed, now raw with anger and betrayal. "She's crossed too many lines," Martha said, and no one disagreed. For a while, life was peaceful, quiet, and then, one late September afternoon, I found out I was pregnant again. It wasn't planned, but when I saw those 2 pink lines, something inside me stilled. It felt like life giving me another chance. Lucas was 5 now, curious, sensitive, always asking questions. I imagined him as a big brother, protective and sweet. Daniel was overjoyed. We both decided to keep it to ourselves until the right moment. That moment came during Daniel's birthday. His parents offered to throw a backyard party at their home in Boulder, complete with string lights, a catered lunch, and a homemade cake from his favorite bakery. We invited close friends, a few colleagues, and family. Everyone knew it would be special, but no one expected Brielle to show up. She wasn't invited. We didn't even know she was in town. But when she walked through the gate in a soft lavender dress, holding a bottle of wine and flashing a sheepish smile, my heart stopped. Daniel's grip on my hand tightened. She went straight to him, hugged him, whispered something in his ear. Then she turned to me. "Lauren," she said gently, "I'm so sorry for everything. I've been going to therapy. I'm not that person anymore." I nodded stiffly. She offered me nothing more. Just that smile. Martha pulled me aside and asked if I wanted her gone. "Say the word," she said. "I'll have Howard escort her out." But Daniel, ever the peacemaker, said no. Let's not turn this into another war. If she causes trouble, we'll deal with it. So I watched her. All day. She laughed too loudly, asked too many questions, made small, harmless jokes that felt like probes. But nothing crossed the line. She even complimented the decorations. The flowers are gorgeous, she said. You always had good taste, Lauren. It was during lunch that she approached me with a plate. I had just sat down, hands resting on my belly, when she walked over with a paper plate stacked with grilled vegetables, pasta salad, and shrimp. Thought I'd bring you something, she said, chipper. Wanted to make up for the past. Congratulations, by the way. I stared at the shrimp. I'm allergic, I said quietly. Oh, she said, blinking. I didn't know. She did. She absolutely did. It was a topic that came up every time we ordered food as a family. I had been rushed to urgent care once because of accidental cross-contamination. She knew. Before I could respond, she turned and walked away. I was still staring at the plate when Colton walked by. Mind if I take that? He asked. I'm starving and I love shrimp. I hesitated, then handed it to him. Sure, I said, distracted. I'll grab something else. He walked off, smiling, already digging in. 5 minutes later, he collapsed. It started with coughing, then gagging. He doubled over, his face flushing deep red. People screamed. Someone called 911. Daniel rushed over. So did Brielle. She knelt beside him, shouting his name, panic rising in her voice. Then she looked up, eyes blazing, and pointed at me. What did you give him? She demanded. What was on that plate? I couldn't speak. I just stood there, watching Colton writhe, thinking that was meant for me. That shrimp, that smile, that apology. I didn't know how, but I knew. Somewhere deep in my gut, I knew. She had poisoned the food, and she had handed it to me. The ambulance arrived within 10 minutes, but it felt like an hour. Guests cleared a path as paramedics rushed through the backyard. Colton was barely conscious, his lips pale, his hands trembling. They loaded him onto the stretcher, while Brielle wept beside him, clutching his hand like a woman halfway through a tragedy she hadn't expected to be real. But I stood frozen, cold, silent. My mind raced through the last 30 minutes, like a surveillance reel. The shrimp, her voice, that too sweet smile. I had almost eaten it. My unborn child and I. We were supposed to be the ones on that stretcher, not Colton. The police showed up shortly after. It was standard, they said. Anytime food poisoning leads to hospitalization, an investigation is launched. They asked questions, took photos, collected plates. I watched from a distance as an officer slipped the plate into an evidence bag, carefully sealing it. My stomach turned, not from pregnancy this time, but from dread. Daniel stood beside me, arms crossed, face hard. When the officer asked who had prepared the food, I hesitated, then spoke clearly. Brielle brought it to me. I didn't eat it. Colton did. That night, the house was quiet. Too quiet. Martha and Howard stayed with us. They couldn't go home. Not after what had happened on their lawn. No one said it aloud, but we all knew what it meant. That something intentional may have happened, and that Brielle was at the center of it. I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the moment Colton asked for the plate. How easily I handed it to him. How that one action might have saved my life and cost him his health. I was shaking when I opened my phone and started typing. I poured out everything. What happened, what I saw, what I knew deep down. I posted it anonymously online, thinking maybe if I said it aloud, the fear would loosen its grip. By morning, there were hundreds of comments, then thousands. People said I wasn't crazy, that my instincts were right, that someone like Brielle didn't just make mistakes, she made choices, malicious ones, calculated ones. Daniel found me sitting on the bathroom floor, knees pulled to my chest. You didn't eat the food, he said gently. You're safe. The baby's safe. But I couldn't stop shaking. Colton isn't, I whispered. That was my plate. I gave it to him. What if? He knelt in front of me. You didn't know. You were trying to protect yourself. You weren't the one who poisoned it. We didn't talk to Brielle. She didn't call. But she stayed overnight at the hospital, refusing to leave Colton's side. The next day, Daniel met with his parents in the kitchen while I sat on the couch with Lucas, pretending everything was okay. It wasn't. My son looked up at me with his innocent eyes and asked, "Is Uncle Colton going to die?" I choked on my breath. "No, sweetheart. He's strong." Later that night, I told Daniel the full truth, that I believed she had meant to poison me, that I had caught the shrimp instantly because of my allergy, but Colton hadn't known. I also reminded him she had prepared that exact plate, handed it to me herself. Nothing about that moment had been casual. Howard sat still for a long time, then finally said, "There are cameras." "What?" "In the backyard. We have cameras facing the patio and garden. Installed them after last year's break-in." Daniel grabbed his father's phone, opened the security app, and pulled up the footage. We watched in silence. There it was, clear as day. Brielle approaching the buffet, selecting items, then carefully adding shrimp to a single plate, glancing over her shoulder, then walking directly toward me with it. No mistake, no accident, just intent. And now we had proof. Daniel didn't say a word after watching the video. He just stared at the screen, fists clenched, breathing shallow. The silence in the room was heavy, charged like the air before a thunderstorm. I didn't dare speak. Martha stood behind him, one hand over her mouth. Howard finally broke the silence. "We need to bring this to the police." I nodded. My heart was pounding so hard it hurt. But I felt something else too, relief. It wasn't just my word anymore. It wasn't just a gut feeling or a mother's instinct. We had proof. Actual, indisputable proof that Brielle had prepared that plate and handed it directly to me. Daniel downloaded the footage, transferred it to a USB, and drove to the police station with his father. I stayed home with Martha and Lucas. Every time the front door creaked or a phone buzzed, my stomach jumped. I kept glancing at Lucas playing with his toy cars, wondering what I would have told him if I hadn't noticed the shrimp. What if Colton hadn't taken the plate? What if, when Daniel came home 2 hours later, he looked like a man who'd walked through fire? "They're taking it seriously," he said. "The officer said it's enough to start a formal investigation, especially with what happened to Colton." That same night, we got the toxicology report. Colton had been poisoned with a compound commonly found in rodenticides, rat poison. Traces were found in his bloodstream, and symptoms matched. I nearly collapsed when I heard it. It wasn't just food poisoning. It was attempted poisoning with intent to harm. Brielle was contacted for questioning the next morning. She didn't even try to deny it. According to the detective, she broke down almost immediately, cried, sobbed, said she hadn't meant for any of this to happen, claimed she was overwhelmed, emotional, that she just wanted Lauren to spend a night in the hospital, to teach her a lesson. She swore she didn't know I was pregnant, said she only used a small amount, that it was harmless in low doses. Her words, harmless. Colton filed charges the same day, and then he filed for divorce. Brielle called Martha from the holding cell, begging her to come. She said she was scared, alone, that she needed her parents, now more than ever. And then she dropped her final bombshell. She was pregnant. For a moment, Martha wavered. I saw it in her eyes, the way her face paled, her hands trembling as she held the phone. But Howard's voice came steady behind her. "She could have killed your grandchild." That was it. They didn't go. Daniel didn't either. Brielle stayed in holding until her bail hearing. No one from our family showed up. And when her court date arrived, everything came out. The camera footage, the toxicology report, her confession, her motive. The judge was stern but clear. Attempted poisoning, tampering with food, reckless endangerment. She had committed multiple offenses, and the fact that she was pregnant did not absolve her. The judge said her child's future would be determined later, but her actions had consequences now. She was sentenced to prison. I didn't attend the hearing. I didn't want to see her cry. I didn't want to hear her excuses. But Daniel did. He said Brielle stood there, trembling, mascara running down her cheeks, and when the sentence was read, she whispered. I didn't think she'd give it to him. I didn't think she'd actually hand the plate to someone else. Like that made it better. Like attempted murder was okay as long as it hit the right target. She tried to shift the blame to me, even at the end. But the truth was clear. She didn't care who got hurt. So long as I paid the price. Brielle went to prison. There were no appeals. No last-minute reversals. Just silence. Her sentence wasn't long by legal standards, but it was long enough to ensure distance. Long enough to give all of us space to breathe. In the months that followed, we tried to settle back into life. Lucas asked questions, of course. Where did Aunt Brielle go? Is Uncle Colton okay now? We answered with gentle truths. She made a dangerous mistake, I said one night, tucking him into bed. And now she's facing the consequences. Colton recovered slowly but fully. When he was ready, he filed for divorce and moved to a new city. But he stayed in touch. That surprised me. I thought he'd want to forget everything, erase the nightmare, but instead he chose connection. He came to Lucas's birthday. He sent cards on holidays. He even came to visit when our second child was born. I still carried guilt from that afternoon, the way I had handed him the plate. But when I finally got the courage to say it aloud, he just shook his head. You saved yourself and your baby. That's what matters. Our daughter was born on a bright morning in March. We named her Grace, and that's exactly what she brought into our lives. Grace, after everything broken. The first time Daniel held her, he cried. Real, silent tears that he didn't wipe away. I didn't think I could feel joy like this again, he whispered. Not after everything. I understood. The trauma didn't leave us immediately. For weeks, I couldn't eat anything unless I'd made it myself. I double-checked every ingredient label. I flinched when someone handed me food at a gathering. My OB suggested therapy, and I said yes before she even finished the sentence. Sometimes I'd lie awake at night and imagine what could have happened. If I hadn't noticed the shrimp. If I'd taken a bite without thinking. If I'd trusted the smile on her face instead of listening to the twist in my gut. It terrified me, but it also taught me something. How close danger can be, even when it's wrapped in family ties and forced smiles. Martha and Howard tried to reconcile their own grief. Their daughter was in prison. Their son had nearly lost his wife and unborn child. But they didn't shrink from it. They stood beside us, supported us, loved us harder. We raised her, Martha said once, voice cracking. We can't undo that, but we can choose who we stand with now. Brielle sent one letter from prison. It arrived 6 months after the sentencing. The handwriting was neat, controlled, the message short. She apologized, said she had been blinded by jealousy and hormones, that she hoped we could forgive her someday for the baby's sake. I didn't reply. Daniel didn't read it. We stored it away with the police report and court documents, tucked deep in a drawer we never opened. Some stories don't need epilogues. Some doors deserve to stay closed. Now, every evening, as the sun dips behind the mountains, Lucas reads to Grace on the porch swing. He's gentle with her, careful in ways that make my heart ache. Snow was falling again. Thick, heavy flakes drifted through the air like slow-motion confetti, blurring the sidewalk in front of me as I stepped out of the grocery store, juggling 2 overfilled paper bags and a purse that wouldn't stay on my shoulder. My breath came in sharp puffs, more from the weight of everything than the cold. I'd only taken a few steps toward my car when I saw it, a plain white envelope wedged awkwardly in the front gate of our house. At first, I thought it was just another flyer, until I saw the emblem, the seal of the Massachusetts Family Court. I stood frozen on the walkway, the snow soaking into my boots, staring at that envelope as if it were ticking. My fingers were numb when I finally picked it up, but it wasn't the cold that made me tremble. It was the single line in bold type at the top: summons for divorce proceedings. I clutched it against my chest, paper crinkling under pressure, and for a moment I couldn't breathe. Eric had finally done it. He had filed for divorce. I don't remember how I got inside the house. The next thing I recall clearly is the way my keys slipped out of my hand when I tried to open the door. They hit the wooden steps with a metallic clatter that seemed far too loud for the quiet neighborhood. Once I made it inside, the warmth didn't help. My skin was cold, but it was my insides that were frozen. 15 years. 15 years of marriage, just swept away with a piece of paper. I dropped the grocery bags on the kitchen counter, not even bothering to unpack them. My eyes moved across the room. So familiar, so intimate, and yet suddenly, it all felt staged. The dining table still had 2 chairs pushed out, like we'd just eaten breakfast together. Except we hadn't. Not in weeks. Eric had moved out 2 months ago. He said he needed space, time to think. And I, like a fool, believed him. I told myself it was temporary, that we were just going through a rough patch, that once the holidays passed, he'd come back, that he still loved me. But the envelope in my hand didn't love me. It didn't offer time or tenderness. It offered a court date. I wandered through the house like a ghost, my fingers grazing the edges of furniture as if trying to anchor myself to something real. When I reached the living room, my eyes locked onto the photo that hung above the fireplace, our wedding picture. It had been there for years, a framed memory of the day I'd said yes to a man who looked at me like I was the only person in the world. I was glowing in that photo. Eric, in his black tuxedo, was smiling in a way that felt sincere. I hadn't looked at that photo in a long time, not really looked. But now, standing there with a summons in my hand and snow melting in my hair, I couldn't look away. The rage came first, then grief, then nothing. Just the numbness of someone who had spent too many nights waiting for a phone call that never came. I stepped up to the fireplace, reached up and took the photo down. It was heavier than I remembered. The frame was thick mahogany, the kind Eric had insisted on back then because things worth keeping should be framed well. I stared at it, unsure what to do. Should I throw it away? Burn it? Keep it as some cruel reminder? Eventually I turned it over. I don't even know why. Habit, maybe. The backing was sealed tight, but I pried it open carefully, as if even the glass might hold secrets. That's when it fell out. A small key, no larger than the one to our old mailbox, slid down from behind the photo and clinked softly onto the hardwood floor. I stared at it for a long time, and then picked it up with trembling fingers. I had never seen this key before. Not in 15 years of marriage. Not once. It had been hidden behind our wedding photo by Eric. But why? And then I remembered the safe. Eric's private safe in the study. He'd installed it years ago, claiming he needed a secure place for important documents. I never asked what was in it. I respected his privacy. He never offered to show me. Never once. But now I needed answers. Still holding the key, I made my way down the hallway, past the photos, the coat rack, the hallway light we never fixed. My heart was pounding. The air in the study felt colder somehow, untouched by the heating vent. The safe was where I remembered, tucked discreetly behind his desk, nearly blending into the wall. I knelt down, fingers shaking, and slid the key into the lock. It fit. With a soft click, the safe opened. And what I found inside changed everything. Inside the safe, everything looked too neat, too intentional. A manila folder sat directly in the center, perfectly squared. Next to it was a small stack of envelopes, a USB drive, and photographs. My fingers hovered above them for a moment. I didn't want to touch them, didn't want to know, but I had already opened the door, hadn't I? I reached for the folder first. On top, clipped with a silver binder, was a printed lease agreement. I didn't need to read far. My husband, Eric Blake, had signed a 12-month lease on a luxury penthouse in Beacon Hill, one of the most expensive neighborhoods in Boston. The lease started nearly a year ago. I stared at the date. Then again. He had another place for a year. While I'd been home, hoping he'd come back, while I'd been mourning the silence of an empty bed, he had been living a second life. I flipped through the rest of the documents. More leases, notarized copies of financial transactions, bank statements from an account I didn't recognize. Every month, like clockwork, tens of thousands of dollars deposited from a company I'd never heard of. Blue Ridge Capital Holdings. It wasn't his salary from the architecture firm. That income came to our joint account. This was separate, hidden, secret, and the numbers, God, they weren't small. Eric had been moving money like a man laundering it, not saving it. There were wire transfers to offshore entities, multiple cash withdrawals, rental payments, and none of it made any sense. I reached for the photographs next. That's when my hands started shaking. The first one was of Eric, but not alone. His arm was around a woman. Young, stunning, hair tied back in a soft bun. They were laughing. She was leaning into him the way I used to. His hand rested gently on her belly. No, the second photo was of them holding a newborn. A hospital band was still on her wrist. The third, him feeding the baby with a bottle, shirt unbuttoned like a proud father in a Pampers ad. And the fourth, a birth certificate. The baby's name. Date of birth. Father, Eric Blake. I dropped the photo. I think I said his name out loud, like some desperate plea, as if speaking it would undo what I'd just seen. The room spun around me. My knees gave out, and I sat on the floor, surrounded by paper and proof, stunned into silence. He had a child. While I was bleeding on a hospital bed from a miscarriage that shattered me, he was preparing for a new life. With her. With them. I don't know how long I sat there. Maybe 5 minutes. Maybe an hour. The snow outside continued to fall, indifferent and clean, covering rooftops and streets in white. But inside, in that little study, everything was wreckage. Eventually, the tears came. Not sobbing. Not even weeping. Just silent rivers down my cheeks. I looked at the safe, at the photos, the money, the lies. There was no coming back from this. But there was power in knowing, power in silence. He didn't know I'd found it, not yet. And that meant I had time. I gathered everything slowly, folded the documents back into the folder, put the photos on top, careful not to bend them. The USB I pocketed. Whatever was on it might matter later. Then I closed the safe, locked it, and kept the key. I stepped back into the hallway, the weight of what I discovered pressing down on my chest. My legs were unsteady, but my mind had started to clear. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to call him. I wasn't going to cry on the kitchen floor with a bottle of wine. No, I needed to think, to plan. I needed help. The one person I could trust with this, the only person who wouldn't treat me like a helpless wife unraveling, was Rachel Levin. We hadn't spoken in nearly a year. Life got in the way, but she'd been my best friend since college, and more importantly, she was a damn good lawyer. I sat down at the kitchen counter, still in my coat, hands stiff from cold and betrayal, and scrolled through my contacts until her name appeared. My thumb hesitated, then pressed. She picked up on the second ring. Hannah. Her voice was warm, surprised. Oh my God, it's been forever. Rachel. My voice cracked, barely a whisper. I need your help. She paused. I could hear her shift in her seat. What's going on? My husband filed for divorce and I found something. Something big. How big? He has a second apartment, a second bank account, and a second family. There was silence. Then Rachel's voice dropped an octave, all emotion replaced with focus. I'm coming over. Don't do anything. Don't call him. Don't move anything. We're going to handle this the right way. Thank you. Text me your address again. I'll be there in 30. I hung up, phone shaking in my hand. Outside, the snow kept falling. But inside me, something else was forming. Not a blizzard. Not a storm. Resolve. The house felt different after Rachel left. She had stayed for over 2 hours. combing through every document I had pulled from the safe. Her lawyer's brain lit up with each inconsistency, each hidden transaction, each lie etched into legal paper. She didn't say much when she saw the photo of the baby, but the look in her eyes said it all. She knew what this meant. She knew what Eric had become. Before she left, she put a hand on mine and said, "Don't let him know you know. Not yet. Let him play his hand first. Then we strike." That night, I barely slept. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the dark silhouette of our old dresser, the same one we'd picked out during our first year of marriage. I waited for dawn like it was a verdict, and when the sun came up, I was still awake. Around 9, my phone rang. Eric. I stared at the screen for a long time before answering. "Hi," I said, steadying my voice. "Hey," he replied, too casually. "Did you get the papers?" I did. I figured. "I'm sorry you had to find out that way. I meant to talk to you first, but you didn't." A pause. "No, I didn't." Another silence. Then he cleared his throat. "Can I stop by? I think we should talk. Face to face." Every instinct in me screamed no, but I needed to hear what he would say, what version of the truth he'd offer. I needed to see if he could lie to my face, knowing I already knew everything. "Sure," I said. "Tonight, around 7. "I'll bring dinner," he offered. "Your favorite, pad thai." I almost laughed. He still remembered my favorite takeout order, while forgetting the vows we made 15 years ago. "Fine," I said, and hung up before he could say anything else. The rest of the day was a blur. I cleaned the house out of reflex, not because I cared how it looked. I did laundry I didn't need to, rearranged throw pillows, threw out a wilted bouquet that had been sitting too long in the hallway vase. Everything I did felt like a performance, a way to distract myself from the storm that was coming through my front door in a few hours. At exactly 7, the doorbell rang. Eric stood there, holding a brown paper bag and wearing that same easy smile he used on real estate clients and PDA moms. His coat was perfectly tailored, his hair freshly cut. He looked good, better than he had in months. Like divorce suited him. "Hi," he said, as if this was just another evening. "You look nice." I didn't, but I let him in anyway. We sat in the kitchen, across from each other. He unpacked the takeout containers, arranging them like we were on some weird date. I didn't touch my food. Neither did he. He broke the silence. "So, I'm guessing you're upset." I tilted my head, slightly. "You think?" He sighed, leaned back in his chair. "This isn't easy for me either, Hannah." "Sure it is. You had a year to plan it." His eyes flicked to mine, startled. Just for a second. Then he masked it. "I didn't plan this. Things just changed between us." I said nothing. He pressed on. "You must have noticed. We were growing apart. You barely smiled anymore. We didn't talk like we used to. It's nobody's fault, it's just time." A textbook deflection. Impersonal. Polished. I forced a small nod, playing along. He relaxed slightly. "Look, I don't want this to be messy. I was hoping we could settle things quietly, fairly." I raised an eyebrow. "Define fairly." "The house, we bought it together. You can keep it if you want. I'll sign it over to you." I stared at him, and, in exchange, "I'd like you to waive any claims to my investments and personal savings." There it was. I leaned forward slightly. "What savings? What investments?" His mouth tightened. "Just small things. A project I've been working on outside of the firm. Nothing major." I laughed under my breath. "You always were bad at lying." His face changed. He didn't speak for a few seconds, then said, "I'm trying to be reasonable, Hannah." Reasonable would have been telling me about Beacon Hill. He froze. I saw the blood drain from his face. The name hit him like a slap. "How?" "I said I'd think about it." I interrupted, not letting him recover. "About the house. About the terms." He stood up abruptly. "I should go." Probably. He grabbed his coat, hesitating at the doorway like he wanted me to say something. Apologize. Cry. Beg. I said nothing. As the door shut behind him, I exhaled for the first time in hours. He didn't know how much I knew, but now he knew I knew something, and that made me dangerous. The house was still when he left. Too still, like it was holding its breath with me. I stood in the hallway for a long time, listening to the click of the deadbolt, the echo of his footsteps fading down the front walk. Only after I heard the car engine start did I let myself move. I walked back to the kitchen, barely noticing the untouched food, the condensation still clinging to the plastic lids. His favorite noodles sat across from mine like some kind of parody of our marriage, steaming, flavorless, fake. I threw it all in the trash. Then I went upstairs, pulled the folder out from where I had hidden it behind a stack of old scarves in the back of my closet, and sat on the bedroom floor. I reviewed everything again, even though I already knew every page by heart. The lease, the bank statements, the birth certificate, the photos. I laid them out around me like puzzle pieces, except the image they formed wasn't a picture, it was a weapon. I kept thinking about what he said. I was hoping we could settle this quietly. Of course he did, because a real divorce, a loud, public one, would raise questions. Questions about money, about other women, about secrets buried beneath luxury apartments and offshore transfers. That night, I didn't sleep. Again, I lay in bed with my phone on the pillow beside me, eyes wide in the dark. I was waiting. For what? I didn't know, maybe for the fear to catch up. Around 2:13 a.m., my phone buzzed. It wasn't Eric. It was a text from an unknown number. Photo attachment. I sat up, pulse jumping. Opened it. It was a picture of me. Me, walking down my street earlier that day. Grocery bag in hand, scarf wrapped tight, head tilted in the cold. Taken from across the street, at an angle. Slightly blurry, but clear enough to know I hadn't noticed whoever was behind the lens. Underneath the photo, just one sentence. Be careful. He's more dangerous than you think. My whole body went cold. I stared at the screen, rereading the words over and over. Dangerous? What did that mean? Dangerous how? My hands started shaking. I got up, checked every door, every window. I turned on lights. I peeked through the blinds. There was no one. Nothing. Just snow. I locked every lock twice. Then I sat back down and typed a reply. Who are you? What do you know? Nothing. No read receipt. No dots typing. I waited. My heart was pounding in my ears. Then, finally, another message. Dig deeper. He's not who you think he is. I wanted to scream. Instead, I did the only thing I could think to do. I called Rachel. She answered on the second ring, voice groggy. Hannah, are you okay? I just got a message. Someone sent me a photo of me walking home. They said Eric is dangerous. She didn't even hesitate. Do not stay in that house alone. I've already locked everything. That's not enough. I'm coming over. No, just let me talk to you for now. Please. Rachel took a breath, switching into her calm, lawyer voice. Tell me exactly what the message said. I read it to her, both of them. Then I sent her the photo. There was a long pause. I don't think this is some random threat, she said. It's too specific. Someone is watching you. Someone who knows something. Someone who knows Eric. Exactly. Her voice dropped lower. We need more than just legal advice now. We need someone who can investigate this quietly without tipping him off. You mean a private investigator? I know a guy. Used to work for the FBI. I've used him for corporate cases. He's good. Discreet. Tough. Then call him. First thing in the morning. I hung up, but sleep didn't come. I sat on the couch with the hallway light on, blanket around my shoulders, phone in my lap. Every creak of the house made me flinch. I kept hearing that message in my head. He's more dangerous than you think. Eric had always been many things, distant, secretive, cold, but dangerous? I didn't want to believe it. But now, I couldn't afford not to. The next morning, Rachel showed up at my house with coffee and a manila folder. "His name is Matthew Crane," she said, handing me a business card. "He's agreed to meet with you this afternoon." "What did you tell him?" "Just the surface. That your husband might be hiding assets. That you found suspicious documents. That you need eyes on him. Fast." I nodded, still holding the card. "You trust him?" "With my life," Rachel said. "And today that might matter." The cafe was tucked between a bookstore and a flower shop on a quiet street in downtown Boston. It was the kind of place that smelled like cinnamon and warm milk, with chalkboard menus and mismatched chairs. Rachel had picked it for exactly that reason. Too quiet for drama, too open for danger. We arrived early. Rachel took a table by the window, pretending to work on her laptop. I chose a booth in the far corner, my back to the wall so I could see the entrance. My hands trembled as I stirred a cup of tea I didn't want. I kept checking the time. At exactly 6 o'clock, the door opened. She walked in like she had every right to be there. Tall, elegant, dark hair pulled into a low twist. She scanned the room, quickly, spotted me, and walked straight over. My heart pounded so loudly I was sure she could hear it. "Hi," she said softly, sliding into the seat across from me. "I'm Lauren." Of course she was. Up close. She looked younger than I'd expected. Early 30s, maybe. Pretty, but in a quiet way. No makeup, no jewelry, just sharp eyes and nervous energy. "I'm Hannah," I said, even though she already knew. We sat there in silence for a moment. Two women tethered by the same man, trying to figure out which one had been lied to more. "I appreciate you agreeing to meet," she said. "I wasn't sure if you would." I wasn't sure either. She looked down at her hands, fidgeting with the edge of a napkin. "I didn't know about you, not at first. He told me he was divorced, that the marriage had ended years ago." I said nothing. "I found out the truth by accident," she continued. "Saw a photo of you and him on his phone." He tried to explain. "Said you were just roommates now. That there was no love left. That the divorce paperwork was already filed." I let out a breath that sounded too much like a laugh. "He's good at making fiction feel like fact." She nodded. I believed him. I wanted to believe him. I was pregnant. I thought, if he's telling me he wants a future, then maybe the past doesn't matter. "You had a son." "Yes. His name is Mason. He's almost one now." I swallowed hard. "Congratulations." The words felt like poison on my tongue. She hesitated, then leaned in slightly. "But that's not why I asked to meet." "Then why?" Her voice dropped. "Because you need to know who he really is. What he's involved in." I frowned. "You mean the money?" She looked up, startled. "You know." I nodded. "About the second apartment, the secret account, the transfers from Blue Ridge." She exhaled slowly. "Then you know more than I thought." "Not enough," I said. "Not to explain why someone's taking photos of me from across the street and warning me that he's dangerous." Lauren froze. "They messaged you too?" she asked. My stomach turned. "Wait, they messaged you?" She reached into her purse, pulled out a sealed envelope, and slid it across the table. "I used to work at Blue Ridge," she said. "Marketing. I didn't know what it really was at first. But over time, things didn't add up. Meetings without records. Documents that disappeared. Money that moved like shadows." I opened the envelope. Inside were printed emails, names, transaction logs, account numbers, enough to bury a dozen people. "My name was on some of those transfers," Lauren whispered. "I didn't sign them. I didn't even know they existed until a friend tipped me off." "And Eric. He's not just involved," she said. "He's embedded. He's the one who makes the money look clean. He moves it through real estate, buys, sells, flips. That's why he opened the company. That's why he kept you. Kept me. As cover, Hannah. You're respectable. Steady. A homeowner. A long-term marriage. Looks clean. It keeps auditors away. The words sliced through me like ice. I was part of his strategy, not his life. I'm sorry, Lauren added quietly. I didn't come here to hurt you. I came because you're in danger, and you deserve to know the whole truth. I stared at the documents again. Dates, signatures, some so large they didn't even look real. It was all here. Proof that Eric wasn't just cheating, he was laundering, hiding, lying on every level. Why now? I asked. Because I'm leaving, she said. Mason and I were disappearing. New city, new names. I've seen what they do to people who talk. I wanted to leave something behind in case they come for you too. My throat tightened. You think they would? I think they'll come for anyone who knows too much. We both sat still, the low hum of the cafe around us suddenly too loud. Lauren stood first. Be careful, Hannah. If he thinks you're a threat, he won't protect you. He'll protect himself. Then she walked out, leaving me alone with a folder full of truth and a life I no longer recognized. The next morning, the city looked different. Not because the snow had stopped, or because the streets were quieter, but because everything I saw now carried a weight I couldn't unsee. Every passerby felt like a potential threat. Every honk, every shadow across the sidewalk made me flinch. I wasn't just betrayed anymore. I was exposed. At 9, Rachel picked me up and drove us to a federal building in South Boston. No labels, no sign out front, just a gray door with a buzzer. A man in a suit opened it. Sharp features, measured eyes. He introduced himself as Agent David Monroe from the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. We were led to a quiet room with bare walls and a single long table. No mirrors, no dramatics, just facts. I handed him both envelopes, what I had taken from Eric's safe and what Lauren had given me the night before. Agent Monroe reviewed every page in silence, marking details with a pencil. Occasionally he asked short questions. Dates, names, context. Rachel answered most of them. I just watched. When he finished, he looked up. You realize what this is, right? I nodded. He's not just laundering money. He's laundering identities. He tapped the edge of the folder. Your husband isn't just complicit. He's essential. He built the mechanism. Blue Ridge is a shell for international funds, dirty ones. We've suspected it for years, but never had this level of internal proof. Until now. So what happens next? I asked. Agent Monroe folded his hands. We build a case, but we'll need your help. Testimony, possibly cooperation in controlled surveillance. And in return, we offer protection, he said. Immediate relocation if necessary. Witness protection if the risk level rises. I swallowed hard, so I'd have to disappear. Possibly, but not overnight. We'll start with federal monitoring. Your phone, your house, your movements. If Eric or his associates become aware you're cooperating, we'll escalate. Rachel put a hand on mine. You don't have to decide now. But I already knew I couldn't live like this, half in, half out of fear. That night, back at her apartment, I stared at the ceiling for hours. My phone vibrated twice. Eric. I didn't answer. The third message finally said, we need to talk. Now, I know what you did. I stared at the words until the screen dimmed. He knew. Somehow he knew. And that meant the clock had started ticking. The next morning, I called Agent Monroe and said the words that burned my throat. I'm in. Whatever it takes. Everything moved quickly after that. Federal officers came to sweep Rachel's apartment. Surveillance was installed. My phone was replaced with a secure device. I was told to avoid contact with anyone connected to Eric, including old friends, mutual acquaintances, even his parents. I packed only what would fit in a single duffel. A few clothes. The only photo I kept was one of me and my mother when I was little. I left my wedding ring on the dresser. Eric called once more. I didn't pick up. The sound of his name on the caller ID was enough to make my stomach twist. 2 days later, under the cover of darkness, I was moved. New town, new identity, new life. I wasn't Hannah Blake anymore. Not on paper, not to the world. But inside, she was still there, and she remembered everything. Sometimes I sit by the window in my small apartment, furnished by the government, temporary, and I think about the woman I used to be, the wife who waited, the woman who trusted, the one who couldn't imagine Eric doing anything worse than forgetting an anniversary. And then I remember the bank accounts, the child, the lies, the danger. I remember the photograph someone took of me walking home. I remember the woman who risked everything to warn me. And I remember that it didn't break me. It changed me, but it didn't end me. One day, this investigation will be over. One day, Eric Blake will be in a courtroom, wearing a suit that doesn't belong to him, facing crimes even he can't explain away. And when that day comes, I won't be in the crowd. I won't be watching, but I'll know. And that will be enough, because I survived the man who thought he owned my silence. And now, I live with freedom in my name.